What would you do if at 70 years old, life gave you the most impossible surprise? Margaret Thompson thought her childbearing years were decades behind her, until one routine doctor's visit changed everything she believed about science, love, and the husband she'd mourned for 5 years. Margaret Thompson sat in Dr. Peterson's waiting room, fidgeting with her purse strap. At 70 years old, these quarterly checkups had become routine since her husband Robert's death 5 years ago. High blood pressure, arthritis medications, the usual concerns of aging, nothing she hadn't dealt with before. Mrs. Thompson, the nurse called her name with an odd expression. Dr. Peterson would like to see you now. Margaret noticed something different in Dr. Peterson's demeanor as she entered his office. He'd been her physician for 15 years, but today he looked genuinely puzzled. Margaret, please sit down. I have your test results from last week's blood work. Dr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and stared at the papers in front of him. I'm going to ask you some questions that might seem strange, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Margaret's heart skipped. Is something wrong? Am I sick? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He leaned forward. Margaret, when was your last menstrual period? She almost laughed. Doctor, I went through menopause 23 years ago. Why would you ask that? And you haven't been sexually active since Robert passed away. Of course not. Margaret felt her cheeks flush. Dr. Peterson, what is this about? He turned his computer screen toward her, showing lab results she couldn't understand. Margaret, according to these tests, you're pregnant, about 8 weeks along. The room seemed to spin around her. That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. I know it seems that way. That's why I ran the test 3 times. Margaret, I need to ask, is there any possibility you could have been intimate with someone recently? I'm not judging, I just need to understand. No, Margaret stood up, her voice stronger than she'd felt in years. Doctor, my husband died 5 years ago. I haven't so much as held hands with another man since then. This test is wrong. Dr. Peterson nodded slowly. Margaret, I want you to think very carefully. Any medical procedures recently? Any treatments, medications, anything unusual? Margaret sank back into her chair, her mind racing. The only thing unusual in her life lately had been the monthly visits from Dr. Harrison, Robert's former research partner. Robert's colleague, Dr. Harrison, has been coming by once a month since the funeral. He brings me Robert's research papers from their laboratory and checks on me. He's a good friend. But that couldn't. Dr. Peterson's expression grew more serious. What kind of research did your husband do, Margaret? Fertility research. He and Dr. Harrison worked on helping couples who couldn't have children. Robert always said their work was his greatest legacy, even though Margaret's voice trailed off as a terrible realization began to dawn on her. She and Robert had tried for children their entire 45-year marriage. The doctors had said it was unexplained infertility. They'd eventually accepted that children weren't in their future and poured their love into Robert's research instead. Dr. Peterson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Could someone have done something to me without my knowledge during one of these visits? The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret, I'm going to call Dr. Harrison right now, and I'm also calling the police. 2 hours later, Margaret sat in the same chair while Detective Morrison took her statement. Dr. Harrison had been arrested at his laboratory, and what they'd found there made Margaret's impossible pregnancy make horrible sense. Mrs. Thompson, Detective Morrison said gently, it appears that Dr. Harrison has been experimenting on you during his monthly visits. We found evidence that he's been sedating you and performing artificial insemination procedures using frozen samples from your husband's research." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "But why? Why would he do this to me?" According to his notes, he believed he was fulfilling your husband's greatest wish, to see you become a mother. He's been using your husband's genetic material that was preserved for research purposes. The detective continued, "Mrs. Thompson, this wasn't the first time. Our investigation shows he's been attempting this procedure for over 2 years. This is the first time it was successful." Margaret felt like she was drowning. "You're telling me that I'm pregnant with my dead husband's child, and that Robert's best friend has been drugging me and violating me for 2 years?" "I'm afraid so. Dr. Harrison kept detailed records. He genuinely believed he was giving you the gift you and Robert always wanted." That evening, Margaret sat in her kitchen staring at the ultrasound photo Dr. Peterson had given her. There it was, a tiny life growing inside her at 70 years old. Robert's child, the baby they'd dreamed of for decades. Her daughter-in-law Jennifer arrived an hour later, having rushed over after Margaret's phone call. "Mom, are you okay? When you called and said you needed to talk, you sounded so strange." Margaret had always appreciated that Jennifer called her Mom, even though she and Robert had never had biological children. Jennifer had married Robert's nephew, but had always treated Margaret like family. "Jennifer, sit down. I have something to tell you that's going to sound impossible." 20 minutes later, Jennifer sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. "So you're really pregnant, with Uncle Robert's baby?" Margaret nodded. "Dr. Peterson says that at my age, the risks are enormous. He's recommending. He thinks I should consider terminating the pregnancy. But Jennifer, this is Robert's child, the child we wanted for 45 years. Jennifer reached across the table and took Margaret's hands. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I'm 70 years old. I have arthritis, high blood pressure, and a heart condition. The pregnancy could kill me, but this baby," Margaret's voice broke, "this baby is the last piece of Robert I have left. And Dr. Harrison. He's been charged with sexual assault and performing medical procedures without consent. His medical license has been revoked. He keeps saying he thought he was helping me, that Robert would have wanted this." The next few months were the most challenging of Margaret's life. Against all medical advice, she decided to continue the pregnancy. The story made national news. The 70-year-old widow pregnant with her deceased husband's child through illegal artificial insemination. Margaret had to endure not just the physical challenges of an elderly pregnancy, but the public scrutiny, the legal proceedings against Dr. Harrison, and the emotional complexity of carrying a child conceived through violation, but created from love. At 34 weeks, Margaret went into premature labor. "Mrs. Thompson, can you hear me?" Dr. Peterson's voice seemed far away as Margaret drifted in and out of consciousness in the delivery room. She felt Jennifer's hand squeezing hers. "Mom, you're doing great, just a little longer." When Margaret heard the baby's first cry, she thought her heart might explode with joy and sorrow all at once. "It's a boy," Dr. Peterson announced. "He's small but breathing on his own." They placed the tiny baby on Margaret's chest, and she looked down at him through tears. He had Robert's nose and chin. After 45 years of marriage and 5 years of widowhood, she was finally holding her husband's son. "Hello, Robert," she whispered to the baby. "I'm your mom. I know this isn't how it was supposed to happen, but you're here now and you're perfect." Jennifer leaned over both of them. He looks just like Uncle Robert did in those old photos. Margaret spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from complications, but baby Robert thrived. At 6 months old, Margaret sat in her rocking chair, feeding her son and marveling at the strange turns life could take. Dr. Harrison had been sentenced to 15 years in prison. In his final statement to the court, he'd said, "I know what I did was wrong, but looking at that baby now, how can anyone say he wasn't meant to be here?" Margaret struggled with that question every day. Her son was a product of violation, but he was also the answer to decades of prayers. He was created through deception, but he was Robert's legacy. "What am I going to tell you when you're older?" she asked baby Robert as he slept in her arms. "How do I explain that your daddy loved you so much he preserved the possibility of your existence, but that someone else decided to make that possibility real without asking permission?" Jennifer had moved in to help with the baby, and Margaret's days were fuller than they'd been since Robert died. But late at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, she grappled with impossible questions about consent, love, science, and fate. "Robert," she whispered to her husband's photograph on the nightstand, "I don't know if you would have wanted this. I don't know if this is a miracle or a tragedy. But he's here now, and he's ours, and I'm going to love him enough for both of us." Sometimes life gives us the things we wanted most in ways we never could have imagined. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most complicated circumstances. And sometimes, at 70 years old, you discover that your story isn't over. It's just beginning a chapter you never saw coming.